there no objections? You want to go?
Okay, perfect, excellent. All righty, Fred, it's right there. I'm gonna call the SMART Budget Committee meeting to order here on Wednesday, May the 3rd, 2023 at 2:05 p.m. We're gonna start off with roll call, please, Ms. Martin.
Mr. Brett Rizigan,
Present.
Mr. John Paul Rea,
Present.
Mr. Cahill Rahal will be with us shortly, participating by Zoom as a non-voting committee member.
Thank you, Ms. Martin, and with 2 of 3 members present, we do have quorum. Next item on the agenda, the chair would appreciate a motion to adopt the agenda. Supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Martin, if we could please have the certification of public notice.
SMART will hold the May 3rd, 2023 Budget Committee meeting at 2 p.m. at SMART's boardroom located on the 6th floor of the Beale Building, 535 Griswold Street, Detroit, Michigan, 48226. Public participation will only be available for members of the public attending in person or those who email comments per the process outlined below. This meeting is open to the public.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Just to confirm, we have not received any written correspondence.
No, we have not.
Thank you. And we are going to see if there are any members from the public going once, twice, and 3 times. We will close public participation and move on to committee reports. Ryan, let's talk budget.
All right. I am gonna pull up. There we go. All right, well, thank you all for being here today. The overall plan would be to go through the budget at a high level. And the overall goal of the budget committee is to work out and any adjustments or changes or questions that folks might have, with the goal of having a resolution to recommend the fiscal year 24 budget to the full board. I am happy to announce that we have a balanced budget, that while being balanced allows SMART to do some pretty exciting things. Some of the highlights this year in the budget are a pretty exciting expansion of overall total miles of about 1.1 million miles added to our expected schedule, as well as about 95,000 operating hours. So that's folks that are directly providing service. And what that does is allows us to provide a much more reliable system, and as well as implement several programs that are designed to make sure we have the most efficient and effective, primarily effective workforce possible, including some pretty robust training programs so that we know that we've got the safest and most well-trained drivers in the region. A couple of other quick financial highlights. We do have some pretty good increases to terminal and route facilities maintenance, with the idea being that we've got the cleanest and sharpest stops, as well as the most pleasant terminal facilities that anyone could ever work at. So that's the idea. What I'd like to do is start with a high level of what is included within the budget, and then touch on a couple of highlights, and then flip it over, rather than going through every single word within the budget, figure out where the additional follow-up questions are, or what the board members or the budget committee is really worried about, and address any items that you might have. So within the budget, there's 2 primary operating items. That's going to be the income statement functional and income statement operational. And what these do is break down for a reader or a user of our budget. The functional version breaks down SMART's budget based on what it is that we're doing. So if we're doing connector service or microtransit service or fixed route service, or general and administrative activities, as opposed to the operational budget that breaks it down by actual expense line items. So did we buy fuel? Did we buy tires? Was it wages? That sort of thing. Also included in the budget is the SMART restricted operating budget. These are the items that we pass through to our community partners and other subrecipients, where SMART is administering a grant or another program to help assist local community transit operations. Also included are, we'll touch on a couple of the revenue and expense allocation graphs, as well as we do lay out the staffing within the budget, as well as the major assumptions that we use to generate the budget. We do break out the functional section into more detail for a user by fixed route, connector, and general and administrative. So that would be the functional review section, as well as what we're giving to each of our community partners in much more detail. And lastly, the capital budget lays out the capital items and or capital assets would be a better way to say, items for which SMART is utilizing grant funding over the fiscal year 24, as well as projecting 5 years into the future, what our capital plan is. Whoops, one too many. I'd like to make just a couple of comments on the overall SMART's operating revenues. Now, we've broken this out into a pie. The biggest section being the local contributions or property tax revenues that SMART receives from each of our three, two counties and then participating communities within Wayne County. The important thing to remember here is this is solely the operating budget, so it doesn't include capital items. So if you think, well, if SMART's going to have an additional $35 to $40 million every year of CapEx, the property tax portion becomes a much smaller part of the overall revenue picture. So just one comment. The green section is SMART state sources. SMART has a great partner in the state of Michigan who provides us with quite a bit of funding. The largest portion of that is the local bus operating assistance program through MDOT, in which the state of Michigan will reimburse SMART for expenses that we incur, eligible expenses that we incur. So the state lays out for us what that means, and then reimburses us based on a formula. Additionally, the state of Michigan is kind enough to, in general, match 20% of any federal source funding that we get. So most of our federal source funding requires an 80-20 fed to local match. The state, in most cases, will chip in for those grants. For the operating budget, about $14.9 million or 8.8% of the budget does come from federal sources. Those being allocations out of the 5307 grant funding that we get through the FTA primarily. However, there are a couple of other smaller sources for unified workforce programs and congestion mitigation and air quality programs. Overall, currently, SMART's operating revenues are only 3.4% of the estimated budget. However, that is something that we are monitoring on an ongoing basis to ensure that we do have the right mix of service, and that the operations that we are putting on the road are sustainable into the future. The other revenues that we have are primarily advertising. So as you see the smart bus going down the road, often there'll be an ad on the side, those types of revenues, as well as SMART does deposit our unspent cash balances into short-term fixed income securities. So we do get a little bit of interest or investment income with regard to that.
Ryan,
Yes.
one of the things that I'd like to point out, to just stress, if you will recall, when we were talking, as far as our education for the millages, we were saying that we leveraged the property tax. For every dollar that we got a 1.3 cents is
1.34.
1.34. Well, as you can see, $49 million of this revenue, that's a substantial portion, is coming from places other than property taxes. So I think it's important for you to know, and everyone else to know, that just what we're doing with the property taxes, even though the millage amount is less than what it was previously, we're still able to still function and add service and do some of these other things because of the state and these other sources of revenue. It's a good news story.
Agreed.
Any questions on revenue other questions on revenue before I move on?
Right, I know we talked a little bit as we were going through some of the pre-briefings and everything about the stability, not only of the tax collection, but what we're hearing at the local level, whether it's from local treasurers and then even from some of the state revenue estimating conferences. So that net levy now at 94.8 with the expansion of Oakland going countywide. Obviously, as you kind of highlighted, giving us the opportunity not only to expand some of those the miles we cover, but also with regards to the operational hours. I think that's going to be mission critical as we're looking to expand the program. And then very much pleased to see, obviously, the continued investment in the microtransit elements too. So.
Speaking of microtransit, it is for next fiscal year. It's about 4% of our total expenditures. That is making the assumption that keeping the zones and the hours as they are now. However, we are working.
That's where I was going.
Yep.
Are we looking at a bump or what's kind of the thought there?
I would think that there's probably going to be a bump in some reallocation.
Okay.
As we look forward, one of the things that we've seen from our review of expansion of microtransit in other places is in some instances it actually replaced some fixed route. So that's where we are. This also, and I can't stress this enough. We are going to continue rather innovative and Herculean efforts to hire people to make sure that we can deliver this service. So we've got some things that we'll be briefing the board on in fairly short order. Some rather innovative things that we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis to attract bus operators, mechanics, trainers, and cleaners and that sort of thing.
Brett, I think that's going to be interesting too, not only as we look at the continued increases in interest, whether it's from the Pontiac zone, but as we've been talking with some of our more rural communities or some of those communities coming in for the first time, what some of these flex zones could potentially look like to orient people to the service.
Well, we have retained services. I think it was a couple of months ago with the board awarded contract to Baker and Associates. And their primary focus is how we can expand flex across the region. So Macomb, Oakland, what have you. And so we will be looking at each county, but we'll also be looking at places where it makes sense for a zone to cross from one county to the other.
I like that.
Because it just may make sense, because as people in jobs don't know boundaries.
And it's not all recreating the wheel.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely
the
not.
community partners, Richmond Linux, Chef White, he's already heard of this concept before, and that's what we'll be fleshing out.
So just so you will know, we had an opportunity, the American Public Transportation Association had a conference, a mobility conference last week. And the things that we're talking about as it relates to the app are not Dwight's pie in the sky. They actually have apps to do these things. And so Baker and Associates, get that in a minute, is going to be working on the technology and the spec that we need to be able to put out in order to be able to do this. But at the same time, doing community outreach to the various communities to see what it needs to look like, not just flex service, but even fixed route service where it makes sense. And again, simultaneously, we're working towards trying to hire people in order to be able to do that. One of the things that is also going to be coming up this year that I want to make sure that we're also, if you recall, last month, the month before, we briefed the board on definition of paratransit. So over time, the Nectar as a brand will go away. There will be paratransit and flex. People who use paratransit may also use flex if that's more convenient. But the idea is to make sure that we can differentiate the two because they are not the same going forward.
And Dwight, I know that we've been mindful with regards to the investments that the board, along with the leadership, has made, obviously with regards to our professional services, our consultants, whether it's Baker,
Correct.
those types of
Correct.
things. And it's very, beneficial that we're starting to see this bear fruit, that whether it's optimizing things that we're doing on the microtransit side, but even as we've looked at it from our community engagement element, how it's been able to help us bridge that delta with regards to talent development and even some of the microtransit elements on that side too. So
So we're the budget for our next budget contains things. I don't know, one of the things that we're trying to do in the next fiscal year is roll out Wi-Fi on the fleet. Instead of just fast, so that the experience, whether you're on any smart bus, you'll be able to have Wi-Fi.
nice.
So there are some things that we are looking to do in terms of the customer experience. That we are, that you're starting to, some things that I've been talking about that we're gonna do, you'll start to see some of that. And there's also going to be, as part of the app, we're gonna be working with community partners like the Jeff Whites and the Voters and Notice.
Awesome.
So you all are familiar with how Uber works. So these are tablet-based applications. So that when the community partners are not serving, whether it's seniors or disabled or whatever in their community, they'll be able to contract with Smart to be able to allow us for them to make flex trips in their off time, which will then help us with our making sure that we can get the coverage and the response time that we want.
Excellent.
So,
Brad, anything from you right now, man? All right. Ryan, sorry for jumping in there.
No, not at all. That was all great. I think the only other kind of point that I wanted to make is that Smart's administrative burden as a percentage of our overall expenditures at about 13.8 is well below some of our peers in the area.
way below. Most of the time, it's in the 20-30% range in most places. So we are way below, and that's even with some of the additions that we've made.
That's good as far as benchmarking
Yes.
too. Appreciate that. Thank you.
We do have some legacy liabilities as well in kind of our other expenditures. So the non-op, it would be retiree liability obligations that we have, as well as the community funding piece, which perhaps maybe for next year we'll break that out separately, just because those things aren't very related. I do want to call out just a couple of things within the functional budget. So if you're following along on the packet, the very first page, or the very first table on page 5, the 5th page. What we have here is just the bottom expense portion of that. So the top portion being the revenue, being very similar to what we just talked about. So I do want to call it just the overall mix of kind of how our service and the expenditures break down. with the allocation of $114 million going towards fixed route service, approximately 19 towards our paratransit or connector dial-a-ride type service, and 6.7 million towards microtransit service.
So one of the things that I've asked Ryan to do, and why we want to be able to, Ryan and Danny will be working towards this. In the 24-5 budget, yeah. I'd like for us to be able to break out connector and have paratransit trips be a separate breakout, so you can see how much service or how much we're paying specifically for paratransit. So as you're aware, that's the service that we have to be, we're federally required to run this parallel with fixed route. And so I think it's important for us to be able to break that out.
Danny and I have been talking about that pretty regularly, and we are working on a plan. Before I move on, any additional questions regarding just the kind of the breakout by function? I'm happy to comment on any of the other line items.
I think the only one, and we talked about this a little bit in our briefing, is at some point, does it make sense to revisit the community credit formula? It was started in the 90s, 2 times municipal credits, and it's kind of been bumped up year after year. And I don't know, there's some odd cases like Walt Lake.
Yep.
Wait,
Maybe worth looking at.
maybe that could be something where we could even bring together a work group with some of the community partners.
I think so, because I would assume that you're looking to make sure that we're equitable.
Yeah,
That the calculation.
whether it's a WODA, NODA, even a
Right,
Richmond Lennox
right,
EMS, and just be like, what could this look
Right.
like? Okay. And then even if there's a need for some advocacy from the state side with regards to some of the allocation coming out and through that end, we'd be more than happy to advocate on behalf of the transit agencies. So maybe we can bring that to full board too, as part of the budget recommendation, that will be one area.
Yeah, well,
As we not only finalize this, but as we look towards 24, that can be an area where we look to modernize it from that perspective.
we'll get a work group together and
Perfect.
get working on that. I'm gonna flip over to another document real quick.
Just out of curiosity, has Mr. Hall joined the call? Is he listening in yet? Or still?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I just.
I'm
that's
sorry.
it. No, you're all good. You're all good, JP. I was gonna comment on the last thing JP said. Anything that we can do to encourage more, opt-ins, especially in Wayne County. I want to think that through a little bit as you're looking at the community credit, because I feel like, well, I don't necessarily see it just yet. I feel like there's something there where we could be strategic. If that makes any kind of sense.
Well, I think that there's a tremendous amount of value add that we can bring. Because as we've talked historically that, we can do some community learning. How can Sterling Heights illustrate some dynamic things they're doing on the senior services side through some of the community credits that could benefit a city like Livonia. So yeah, I think there's a lot of shared resources we can have in that arena too. Sweet. All right, Ryan, what do you got up next?
I just want to call a couple of expenses by type. Overall, the plan for next year is to increase active employee wages by 18.2%, excuse me, the overall expenditure by 18.2%. So that's partially increases, partially expansion, as well as we do have an additional 24 new positions, both operational and general and administrative, budgeted in this year.
And just, I want to make sure I make this comment because oftentimes people are concerned when you talk about adding those many positions. They all have, one position we're adding, for example, is a warranty clerk. So warranty clerk pays for itself. We buy buses, our buses under warranty. So I'll ask you guys a question. Would you have a car and you pay the warranty expenses yourself? Exactly. So we're gonna add a warranty claims person to make sure that we can go back to the manufacturer for warranty items. That's one thing. We have positions in there to help us primarily with our fleet management and planning and preventive maintenance programs. And also making sure we are required by federal law to do so many, drug tests and alcohol tests before, during, and after work. And they have to be spread across 7 days, 24 hours a day. You can't do them all Monday through Friday.
Mhm.
So currently, we don't staff supervisory personnel in our garages on Saturdays and Sundays,
Mhm.
which means that people can come to work and technically be drunk and we not know it. Because they just call in the dispatch. So we are adding some of these positions to be able to address that safety hole that we have. Which we think is certainly significant. So I'm not, our objective with a lot of this is to be able to make sure that the money that we spend can be as much as possible directed on the product.
Gotcha.
And so we're doing these things in the safety area primarily to reduce our costs in that space. And to, as well as to be able to reduce the organization's exposure.
Okay.
So, and Ryan, one of the things that I also, Ryan and I have talked about is that, historically, we do not charge staff time to capital projects. So what that means and what the FTA will allow you to do is when you draw down a grant, you can add, was it 10%?
It administratively, but like if it's a direct cost of the
Right.
project, you're building something yourself, you can add
Right.
as much as you need.
Right, so in that regard, we haven't done that. And so we're going to be looking at this next year, how we can allocate staff time to capital projects, because that frees up dollars on the operating side that we can reinvest into something else with.
Gotcha.
So, so that's just part of what's, when we're talking about employees, that kind of thing. So just wanted the board to be aware of that.
Excellent, Ryan. I know you're switching over to operations. Just want to thank you for the refreshed perspective too, with regards to our contribution for the retirees also on that end. We're at almost about $13 million annually on that contribution now. Just kind of looking at that. So appreciate that.
Yep.
Hey,
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Khalil.
yeah, no, so I have a question. How many open positions do we have right now?
The fiscal year 23 budget has 923 budgeted positions. And as of the last headcount report I looked at was February, but we were at approximately, I think, 763.
Okay, so 100 and 150, whatever, 75.
760.
What is that? Yeah, what does that generate in terms of a surplus?
It's substantial.
Sizable.
Yeah. Because most of those are operators. And so that's in service that wasn't delivered. Probably 100 or so of that number is bus operator.
Right. What happens to that money? Does it just get carried over and get spent where?
So it does remain in Smart's net position. As far as from a cash standpoint, the last few years, some of you may recall in June, I've come with a budget amendment to apply some pretty substantial amounts of that money towards our legacy liabilities, so retiree healthcare and pension.
Got it.
So reallocation would, I guess, be the short answer there.
Yeah. I guess I'm not so worried about the increase in employee costs.
No, well, one of the other things that we have, Ryan and I have talked about is no organization is ever 100% staff.
True.
And so there's always going to be some measure of dollars that are going to, I'm careful about the term surplus, but it's late in the day. So,
There's some variability.
there's some variability in
Yeah.
that, and so we want to be able to, for the next budget, be able to be more precise in what we would expect that vacancy to be, so it can be reflected.
Appreciate that, Cliff. Ryan, I know you want to hop into some operational stuff.
Real quickly, I just wanted to call out overall operationally. It's a similar percentage increase. We're anticipating about a 19% increase, but remember, a substantial portion of that is related to that additional 1.1 million miles that we're anticipating.
And Ryan, I believe that one of the biggest implications that has is on the vehicle insurance.
Yes, so well, if you're going to run another million miles,
Yeah,
there will be more
it.
accidents associated with that. Unfortunately, that is the reality. Additionally, SMART has observed a higher than previously expected payout rate. So
Okay.
we are estimating a little bit higher at about 37 cents.
And Dwight, this goes back to the training and stuff.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So
Okay.
we have defensive driving plan for all of our operators and supervisors. And, you know, just a host of things and reviews, training and retraining, if you will, to help drive that number down.
Gotcha. Yeah, it really jumps off the page when you look
Yes,
at
it
that from
does.
some of the conversations we've been having from the
Yes,
board's
it
perspective.
does.
Excellent. Ryan, any more considerations as we look at this from macro level?
The only other two quick comments I had with regard to administrative expense increases. Again, to make SMART the most effective and efficient place possible, we do have a number of process improvement projects planned. One of which I'm very happy to report in the finance department, hiring a consultant to help us review updating our financial system.
Nice.
Many of those so you see approximately a $1.5 million increase. About two of those we are anticipating that we can charge again to federal grants.
Excellent.
And again, these well, process improvement is an ongoing activity. These projects themselves are individual, so they don't continue into perpetuity. So you were
The process changes, should.
Sure.
right, exactly.
And
Yes.
also bring savings.
Exactly.
So that's not an expense that, you know, we're anticipating or that continue forever, I guess would be the idea there. Yes.
Our planning, so one of the things that we are planning to do is, we've got the bus stop survey.
Yep.
That we're going to be doing, that's in here. We're about to embark upon an alternative fuel analysis to determine what's the best mix of, zero emission, vehicles, whether that be electric or hydrogen or whatever the case may be. So many. Oh,
There's I have a short-lived maintenance policies and procedures, so
Yeah.
streamlining the shop.
exactly. So we're gonna have somebody actually come out and actually assess our fleet and develop some different procedures, basically, here's the fleet, here's how you get into this kind of shape. Yes. And so, we've got a number of things that ultimately are about providing a better product and improved process.
Great.
Which we will keep the board informed with, and we also want, because I don't think we're streaming this or
It's on YouTube.
YouTube, that anybody in the public would see that we are moving SMART in a different direction.
Appreciate that. Awesome. Ryan, any other thing from a structural perspective?
No, that was everything I had with regard to the operational budget. I do have just a couple of quick comments with regard to the
Please.
capital budget. So SMART has a substantial amount of grants available to us to spend. A lot of that is a result of we applied for a grant in September of 2019, and hadn't spent all of that money by March of 2020, and our plans have changed significantly since then. So one of the
I've heard some
major,
things.
don't know why, but one of the things that we are working on is a capital improvement plan to make sure that we are reprogramming and spending those dollars in the best way for SMART to move forward based on the new environment. So in the months to come, you'll see.
So this time next year, we will be asking the board to approve this budget and a capital budget. As Ryan mentioned, we have grants, but the capital program will designate when those funds will be spent. So for example, if we are, I'll use this example, if we had a multi-year BRT project, you need to know when those dollars are going to be spent over the next however many years to be able to make sure that we can afford it as an organization. And so that's what I've asked Ryan to get us prepared for the next budget year, and that's the work that we'll be doing going forward.
That was pretty much all of my comments with regard to the budget. I would like to turn it over and just see if anybody has additional comments or questions, or if there's anything else I can go into more detail on.
Ryan, I cannot thank you enough, not only for the preliminary briefings that you provided to each one of the committee members on this end, but very much feel that, as you highlighted, obviously the expectation is having a balanced budget, but having an ambitious plan here, not only to invest in authority and illustrate the value add to the community members and our riders, I think is mission critical. And as we discuss, not only candidly as a board, but as we continue to receive feedback from the public, we're very much pleased to see that the resources are going to be allocated to tackle some of the shared challenges that anyone that is involved in operating a transit system is faced with, whether it's down to operators or amending service to meet the expectations of the community too. So very much appreciate the thoughtfulness on the leadership there. Mr. Resnick, anything on your end?
The only thing I would add is that we had our first meeting with Pete Michael Baker, so his representatives, and it was a very positive meeting. It was a good firm, a good contract.
Excellent.
Planning extensive public engagement throughout the SMART service area. I think that will be very important. I think that the general public is just wanting that engagement. Public transit.
So that'll be the first of many that we will have going forward as the service will evolve over time.
Mhm.
As Ryan mentioned, and we all know, the pandemic has changed things.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have all yet really know what the end result is, what the new normal is going to be. I don't know that has yet been established.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure over the next year that we are moving in the direction of the new normal, because I can tell you it's not going to go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I want us to be mindful of the fact that this is a service economy and a service workforce, not necessarily manufacturing, which means that people work different days and what have you. The other thing that I also want to make sure that you all are aware of is we're going to have a strategic planning effort. This is part of this budget. We're going to try to kick off fairly soon after the fiscal year.
Awesome.
And we will be looking for board guidance as we look at that, so that we can have the document that will guide us as an organization going forward.
Appreciate that. Excellent. Mr. Hall, I know you're still on the line. Khalil, got anything to add?
I just want to thank Ryan and the staff. They did give me a good pre-briefing. Ryan, during that briefing, I expressed some concerns, nothing major. It seems like it's a very great, substantial, balanced budget. I know we're healthy and we're doing well. I generally don't like taking one-time influx of cash and using it on sort of annual expenditures. I know in our discussions we saw a drop in fare box revenue. And I know we're supplementing some of that with some of the federal funding. For me, that's not what I don't know that I don't want to see that happen year after year after year. I like one-time expenses to be used on one-time capital costs. I like planning, in that aspect of things. And it seems like we have a substantial amount of federal funding, so I get it, and it makes a ton of sense for now. But I do want to see more capital expenditures. I've always believed in that. And so, I really want to see these federal funds be spent in that way instead of plugging holes. And then sometimes it's 6 to 1, half a dozen. But I just appreciate doing it the other way around for planning purposes.
So, Mr. Hall, just so you will know, is philosophically, I agree with you 100%. And one of the positions that was even created in the last budget that we're expecting to fill in this one is a person that is going to be responsible for the program management. So basically, a capital improvement plan is a large program under which all of the capital projects fit underneath. And so that's what we will be establishing so that you can see in the board how the money for capital programs are spent for those things.
Wonderful.
And more importantly, is capital programs can't be done if they can't be paid for. And by that, I mean, if we're going, it would be not good idea to get a capital program for new service, but not be able to afford the service after you got your building.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So that's where we're going.
Good to hear.
Okay.
Excellent. Alrighty. Guess we'll start off with a motion to receive and file Ryan's committee report, please.
I make that motion, receive and file. This report.
Support. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, the chair would entertain a resolution to recommend approval for the proposed fiscal year 2024 operating budget, the restricted operating budget, and the proposed fiscal year 2024, fiscal year 2028 capital budget to move to full board.
Try to say that 3 times.
I'll try.
I won't try it once. I make that motion.
Support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Any other business before the committee today? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Support. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thanks for joining us, everyone. 2:47.